Hello, hello. It is Ariana and Valerie today. And I'm so excited because Valerie does something that I have on my bucket list. And beside that, Valerie and I together wrote this book where we both wrote a little bit in it. And it all comes so well together. So, welcome, Valerie. I am super excited because I want to know everything about pilgrimage.
How
Can you
much time did you say we had?
can you start to tell who you are? Because the pilgrimage will come, but I want to know who's Valerie.
Well, I am a dog mama, and that's where you and I have another great tie-in and affinity. I am a farm girl born and raised, but have spent a lot of time in different parts of the world. But my roots are very much in the earth, and very much, as my neighbor has said, I have dirt in my veins. And I think there is a certain truth to that because I am most at home in this world when I am walking it, when I can be out enjoying the nature around us, seeing a sunrise, listening to the birds, walking across, whether it's walking the park in my neighborhood or whether it's traversing a trail across Spain. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
Wow, that's really cool. And you said it already. It ties right into where we're going with the pilgrimage. It is,
And
yeah.
yes, and it's one of those things where I have probably done pilgrimages all my life, and even before I realized that what I was doing was a pilgrimage.
Yes, and I love that because when I got to hear about what you were writing and who you were, and you were explaining what a pilgrimage is, it was for me something like I thought like, oh, I'm already doing it. And I love that part. However, I still have that big dream on my bucket list to do a big pilgrimage. And you did that. And I think from the moment that you started to do that, and I hope you tell me all about that and where it was and how it felt and how it changed you. Because from
Mhm.
that moment, you kind of started to be aware how much you did already before, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And it is so true that when people think of pilgrimages and they think about, well, how would I define that? They think I need to go on this big trek and it has to be long and it has to be across the world and I have to put on my backpack and away I go to it. And we'll get to that because I have a very different view of what a pilgrimage is. Yes, it can entail that, but it also can entail much more small journeys. It's more about the mindset.
Yes.
And the first pilgrimage that I went on, where it actually was a pilgrimage, was the Camino de Santiago, the Française route, which starts in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in the Pyrenees of France and takes you up over the Pyrenees and heads off across, west across Spain, the breadth of Spain, to Santiago and the cathedral there. And when I first thought about doing it and going on that journey, it had nothing to do about a pilgrimage. I was an art student and I was studying art history. And they were talking about these wonderful cathedrals that had been built along this route and why they had been built. And I thought, oh, that'd be very interesting to see that. Then I met somebody who had in my community who had been on the Camino de Santiago, and that sparked an interest in my mind. What I didn't know is it would take me 6 years before I could actually bring that vision and that dream to fruition. And so that's why when you tell me that it's on your bucket list, keep putting it out to the universe because the universe will hear that and the universe will make it happen. And I was, it just was, the timing wasn't right. And it took me 6 years to bring it together. And at that point, it was like, whoa, 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 stop the world. I need to get off. My life is completely out of control. And I felt like I was going downhill and down a mountain on my sled and had no brakes.
Oh, yeah.
And you may have been there yourself. And I thought, well, I can't exactly stop the world, but what's the next best thing that I can do? And I thought, it's time to go on my Camino.
I love that. And I think that was perfect timing. And we started together, right? This whole interview with timing is perfect. So if you have it on your bucket list and you're not there yet, that's okay. Because if you really want it, there will be a time for that. And on the other side, if you do like a pilgrimage that is long, you need to spend the time for it. So that means that there is a lot more preparation for it. And that is the other part where a lot of people are like, oh, I cannot do that, right?
Yes. And that's also where someone like myself can be of help, because I lead pilgrimages and I help people think about what do they need to prepare. It literally is, as you said, that you don't just decide, you know what, I think tomorrow morning I'm going to get up and I'm going to go on a pilgrimage across Spain. And you don't have your shoes, you may not have your backpack ready to go. It's a little bit snowy in the Pyrenees at this time of year.
Yeah.
So, if you might want to choose a different route. There's actually, if you decided you were going to do a Camino de Santiago, for an example, there are actually 8 different routes. And so you might say, you know what, at this time of year, I think I'm going to start in Sevilla and come up through Spain, because the weather is fantastic there and I'm not going to have to traipse through any mountains. I'm actually going to be out in the plains and it's going to be nice and sunny. And so there's things to think about. And you might be, depending on where you're going as well, because there are pilgrimages, if you wanted to do something that was more spiritual or perhaps had a religious component to it. You might need a visa, you might need an updated passport, you might need entrance documents to get into the particular country you're going to. So again, it is all of those things of its timing. And I think probably the most important thing about the timing, though, is what's going on up here.
Yes. I think it's also letting go of certain things, right?
Yes. I mean, I had to let go of, when I first walked my very first Camino, it was 2007. So the world was very different technologically.
Yes.
So we did not have these creatures as readily available. The one I had was one of the very first Blackberries. Some people may remember those, and others will go, a what? So no, it wasn't fruit I had with me. It was one of the very early phones. But the internet was so few and far between at that point that it was literally every 5 to 7 days before I could connect to someone and connect with the rest of the world. And so I had to let go of the idea that I was going to be in constant connection with friends and family. And I had to prepare my family for the fact that I was going to be trekking with whatever I owned and needed on my back through these distant lands, and that they would hear from me only once a week, if they were lucky. And so that was, there was preparation for not only my own mindset, but for those that were going to be my support community as well.
Yeah, and I totally get that, because a little secret is my daughter is walking the Camino in May this year. And that is one of the things these days, they're not connected. How does it work? So that was a big thing that she started to prepare us already. Like, I'm not connected with you all the time. I hope you know. And she started to know that I don't need to be connected all the time. So that is really a thing that in 2007, it wasn't that much of a habit to be always connected as it is now, right?
Yes. In fact, when I walked my most recent Camino, I was actually disappointed. And then I had to stop myself and say, we each have our own Camino. We each have our own pilgrimage. So what I'm experiencing isn't what somebody else is experiencing, because I was mortified to see the number of people that were walking the Camino like this. And they
No
were
way.
paying absolutely no attention to what was going on around them, because they were either on the phone or they were doing this. And I thought, you're going to trip over a gopher hole or step into a cow patty, because particularly on the Camino de Santiago, you walk the ancient pilgrimage routes, which are the sheep trails, the cow paths, the highways and byways of Spain. And so you do need to watch where you plant your feet.
Yes. But again, you're doing it for yourself.
Mhm.
So it's letting go of what others do on the same trail, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And that leads me to a really interesting point, because one of the biggest lessons I learned from my very first pilgrimage that a dear, dear friend had told me about was that the Camino you have is the Camino you are meant to have, not the one that you have envisioned. And I thought, yeah, I get what you're saying. But I really didn't until I was on my Camino. I had a day where there was driving rain coming at me. I was having to literally put my head down into it, because it was a typical, anybody who's from Southern Alberta will understand this. It was a typical Western Chinook wind where it almost blows you off the face of the earth, coming right at us with driving rain. And it was 2 steps forward and 3 steps back in this wind. And by the time the group of us got to our hostel where we were staying, and you check yourself in, I couldn't remember what language I was speaking, never mind what my name was. I garbled out something in a mixture of Spanish, French, English, and German. And the gal looked at me kind of puzzled, and I just put my finger up and I said, I'll be back. I went, I had a shower. I went out to the market and got some food, because my love language is one of them, is cooking for others. And so I went out and got some food. I brought it back to the hostel. There was about 20 of us. I cooked up a batch of food. People were cutting some bread. We had pasta and sauce and some wine and fruit and camaraderie. I could relax. I could come back into that connection of why I was on this journey. Then I could go and check in and actually give them an articulate answer of who I was
Right.
and what country I came from.
So you were almost so far disconnected from yourself at that moment. So you need to get yourself back before you could answer.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I learned about the power of a pilgrimage is connecting with self, and
Yes.
being able to take what's happening to you and the experiences that are going on around you and connect that back to, well, who am I? And what do I want out of this world? And what do I want out of my life? And you can do that walking around the block, going for a walk with the dog, breathing in the air, listening to the birds around you.
Yes.
You know, you don't have to go on a major pilgrimage, because there are people, and I think one of the ones that really brought that home to me is I met a fellow after the Camino, and I was giving a talk about the experience, who was physically incapable of doing the Camino. And instead, what he had done, and I thought this is brilliant, he had an acreage. He created a Camino trail that his wheelchair could go on all around his acreage. And he had milestone markers that would be what those markers would be, as if he was on the actual Camino de Santiago. And at those points, he would stop, because that was something that he really wanted to be. He wanted it to be that particular trail. And he had milestone markers, and he would read about what the town was like, that he was going to be there. And he journaled about how he was feeling in his body and how he was feeling in his mindset. And he just made the laps around his acreage, and he got to Santiago. And I just thought, there is the power of the human spirit.
Yes. And I think that is the part that I love. I love to connect with nature. I love to be in nature, enjoy this. Like, we had a lot of snow over this winter, and yesterday we had the first sunny day, and we were right away outside with the face in the sun just to soak it all up. And today we have snow again. So you need to be quick because otherwise it's gone, right? But the enjoying part from nature is also the part that brings you back to the thoughts, who you are, what you want, and why you want it. Because the whole world is trying to put all expectations on you. And especially if you do a pilgrimage like the Camino, you are kind of disconnected a little bit from the world to find literally who you are, what you want, and why you want it, right?
Yes. And I think, and that is probably the key thing about the power of pilgrimage, is North Americans in particular. We have tended, probably, I don't know how many decades, but at least the last 30 or 40 years, to wear busyness as a badge of honor. And I'm here to tell you that my own personal experience, the reason I needed the stop the world, I need to get off, is because I had embraced that badge so successfully that I was spinning out of control.
Yes.
My job was so busy that I couldn't know what was up and what was down. I did have no balance with my personal life as well. And I thought, this is ridiculous. This is not how I want to hurdle through life. And the Camino, because in 2007, when I did the very first one, there was not the technological connections that we have, I literally was able to step away.
Yes.
And to be with my own thoughts. And I also found, and the universe will do this for you too, is I was connected with individuals who helped me understand and be aware of that. I met a nun who had taken a vow of silence, so that when she was actually walking during the day, she spoke to no one. She would acknowledge you with a nod, but she, would put her finger to her lips, and she spoke to no one, because it's a trait that when you pass another pilgrim, you say buen camino when you're on the Camino. So as you're walking along, you say that to everyone you pass and that you meet. And she would just finger to the lips. And I met her. She ended up staying in one of the albergues that I was staying in a few days later. And after dinner, after she had had her prayer and her journaling time, then she would come and sit with the rest of us, and she would commune. And so I had an opportunity to connect with her and ask her about that. And I thought, there's something very valuable about that lesson.
Yes.
And so I was able to take that away. And my journaling became far more in depth as a result. I also remember a point, when I made the mention earlier about having the nose in the phone. Well, I didn't have my nose in the phone, but I was so in my head of just walking along that I was almost oblivious to what was going on around me. And a fellow pilgrim said to, all of a sudden, there was this voice said, "Isn't this vista spectacular?" And I was like, huh, what? It come out of my little reverie, and it was like, vista? What? Oh. And I'm looking out on this incredible valley that I almost missed because I was just so busy putting one walking stick in front of the other, walking the path, and one foot in front of the other, and I'd almost missed it. And it brought me to upright to the point where I said, okay, found a rock, sat down on the rock, took a deep breath, took in this magnificent vista, watched other pilgrims go by, journaled about what did that just tell me about how I got so inside of my head. And so sometimes you need to do that. But other times you need to literally stop. And as you were saying, feel the sun on your face. get out there and enjoy those good days, and
Yes.
and take that environment in around you.
Yes, I love when I walk with the dogs, and I love long walks, but I also love to just sit. In the past, I was always like, I need to have a lot of kilometers in there because I want to be active, right? But now I start to slow down. If there is a place where I can sit, sorry, if there is a place where I can sit, then I just sit and enjoy what I see. I need to have a drink. Wait a minute.
Not a problem.
But now I start to enjoy more of my walk instead of being so busy with how much kilometers I walked, right? So days that I am in my mind, I start to sit and try to use at least three senses from me: what I hear, see, feel, smell, whatever. And I start to explore what they tell me just to get
Yes.
out of my mind, right?
Yes. And when you were talking about walking with the dogs, one of the things I have found, because that's what I often do, is my walks are with the dog, is I start to put myself kind of, what are they seeing? What are
Yeah.
they smelling? What are they sensing? And because often the walk is about them. Even if it's more, I'm going for a walk and I'm taking them with me. They especially mine, he loves to put on the brakes and tell me that, no, Mom, the walk is about me.
So now going back to the Camino, did you walk it more than once?
I have walked 3 of the Camino routes. I've been very blessed to have the opportunity of walking 3 of the Camino pilgrimages. And I've also done other walks that are on a much more pilgrimages on a much smaller basis.
Okay.
So the when I said it took me 6 years for the first one to walk it, I had wanted to make sure that I had the time to do it all at one time. And that was a personal thing for me. And there were many, many people that I met that were taking 1 week or 2 weeks, and they were literally doing it. Okay, this year I'm doing 1 week, and I'm going to pick up where I left off next year or in 2 years.
Right.
And that's doable too, because you got to think about what's going on in your own life. Can
Yeah.
you step away? How old are my children? Do I have aging parents that I also need to consider? What else is going on with my job? Can I get all of that time together? I was extremely blessed, although my boss said, no, we're never doing that again, to have 5 weeks, because I took my 3-week vacation from the one particular year and carried forward 2 and went for 5 weeks, so that I did 35 days of a pilgrimage, stepping out in Saint Jean Pied de Port, walking 25 to 30 kilometers a day, and then ending up in Santiago 35 days later.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. So when you start to walk or to prepare you walked it on your own, right? And then you met other people there.
Yes. Now, I will qualify it in that the very first pilgrimage that I did, I was intending to walk it on my own. 2 weeks, and this is where preparation is a very important thing. 2 weeks before I was ready to head out, a very dear friend of mine's widow asked if they could come along with me. So they had 2 weeks of preparation. But it was extremely important for them in their mental mindset. And we actually celebrated the anniversary of the passing of their spouse on the Camino. But unfortunately, they suffered horribly from blisters because they weren't ready. And I had prepared for 6 weeks prior to going. I walked every day to work. I walked home from work. I got used to my shoes so that I knew how they were going to fit. I got used to what kind of socks I needed as far as how my feet were going to be cold or sweating or whatever I needed. And that's where that part of that preparation comes from. as well. It's not that you want it to be a good experience, not something where your body is aching and you are horrified that every day you got to roll out of bed and do another walk. I actually got to the point probably about 2 weeks in where my body craved the 25 kilometers, as crazy as that might
I
sound.
totally get that. Yes. Yes, and that's so good. And so with your preparation, you are walking a lot with that, but the Camino is in the mountains. So that's a whole different story, isn't it?
It certainly is. And I have to admit that even though I did some walking using a reclined treadmill,
Yes.
I was not prepared for the first day of walking from Saint Jean up into the Pyrenees and then down into Roncesvalles. And if there had been a taxi cab anywhere near, I would have been in it so fast. But unfortunately,
right. But on the other side, if you can make the first day, the rest will work out too, right?
it's downhill from there, quite literally.
So that is what I told my daughter. I think like if you just make the first day, you will get there.
Yes.
Yes,
And
awesome.
and that's one of the things where I think that it's also important for that mental mindset of preparing for the pilgrimage. And I'm glad that your daughter is also talking to you about that, because your loved ones and your network needs to be aware that you are going to be a different person when you're on the pilgrimage, and you will come back a different person too,
Yes.
because you've had that alone time. You've had that time with the navel gazing, of being able to pause. And most recently, would have been August of last year, as we were writing our chapters for the book, I came to a mental roadblock, and I just had writer's block like you would not believe. And I had a very dear friend that was out visiting, and we headed off into Glacier National Park in Montana. And we went on a hike, and I had the dog with me, and he was still a baby at that point, so he was in my backpack. But I used a miniature pilgrimage of just 3 hours to reconnect with where I needed to be in my mind to be a good author, to convey what I needed to convey to my audience. And it was amazing how that 3 hours just cleared away all of the cobwebs, gave me the clarity I needed to just be able to go forward and write what I needed to write. And there was components that I went, wow, yes, I'd forgotten. I wanted to say that as well.
Awesome. And I love that. So bring your book back and tell me, because in that book, there's from 4 authors, and you are one of them. In that book, you describe your experience, but you do much more in that chapter. So can you tell me a little bit what is in the book?
Definitely. So yes, I talk about the experience, but I also talk about preparation, and that there are different levels of preparation. It's not just physical. There is emotional. There is the mental preparation. There's preparing your loved ones. There's preparing your employer that you need to be. But there's also some of the resources, things you need to think about, the importance of connecting back to yourself. You might be really in tune with yourself, and the pilgrimage is just a way of continuing down a path you've already set, that yes, this is where I want to be going. It can also be, and that's what I focus a lot on in the book, is where do I want to be and how do I reconnect with myself? Particularly at different stages in our life, we enter different chapters of our lives. We might become empty nesters. We might change a job, whether it's a retirement or whether it's a restructuring, a downsizing, an amalgamation, whatever term that is vogue at the time, that there's a change in your life that gets brought about that you had not anticipated. There might be a sudden illness or death in your family. and you come to a major intersection in your life. And a pilgrimage can help you get through that because you have some time with yourself to really stop and ask yourself some important questions about, where do I want to go with my life? Am I on the path that I want to? Or, you know what, I've always dreamed about doing this. And maybe this is the time to do that. And you
Right.
can reconnect with yourself.
And it's so important because in yeah, we talked already how busy our lives are. Sometimes it's so hard to step back in that busyness and take that time for yourself.
Mm-hmm. And that's why you might have on your bucket list to do a long pilgrimage. And I am a very firm believer that if you have that on your bucket list, journal about it, put it there, because the universe does not like a void and it will make it happen. Just be ready for it.
I
But there are ways that you can, this afternoon, literally go out to, if the weather is crazy, go out to an internal track at your local gym and put your earbuds on with some music that is going to help you bring your level of anxiety and busyness down, and go for a walk around the track. Stop and journal about it afterwards at your favorite coffee shop. Or go out in the park, go for a walk in the snow, clear your head. So it could literally be a half an hour. It could be a couple of hours. It could be a weekend getaway with friends or yourself. It could be a retreat, or it could be a 5-week walk across Spain.
Yes, I love it. And it's so funny because as soon as I said that, oh, yeah, that's something I really want to do as well, I see like long trails over the whole world coming up. And I'm like, oh, I would like that one too. And there is many long trails that you can walk. And Camino is kind of a very authentic one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you go in the ancient times where they did it already. But there's a lot, like here in Ontario we have the Bruce Trail.
Yes.
And but I love to just plan to do it. And coming back to when you are in a time of your life where you need this, I would almost put this as a subject in school, that every person who is 18 or is done high school should first start to listen to who they are, what they want, and why they want it, because most of them have no idea.
That's right. And I think about myself. I was probably in my 30s before I really figured out who I was and what I wanted out of life.
Yes,
The prior to that, it was, what does my family want from me? What does society expect of me? What are my obligations to my community? And you put all of those things first and foremost, and you think about some of the milestones. It's like, okay, I graduated from high school. I must go to university or college, or I do a trade. And now I've got that down. Well, now I must start a family. Now I must buy a house. I have my mortgage. And well,
yes,
says who?
yes.
Says
So
who?
so break the pattern, right? That we are programmed to be, and start to find out who you are. And pilgrimage is one of the ways where you can really dig into your own feelings and figure that out. And one thing I want to say, that it's important that even if we figure out who we are right now, that doesn't have to be in 5 years the same, because also we can still change. So I am so blessed to hear that my second daughter, who is right now in Europe already, who wants to do this Camino, because it's great for her to explore who she is.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean that in a year or two or three or four that she still has the same ideas that she will have right now. So that is really important too. And with asking young people these days what they want to do, they say something and they are afraid because now they cannot change it anymore, but they can, right?
Yes. And I think that that is bang on, Ariana, is that, and the fact that your daughter is doing it at a young point in her life, it could literally change tomorrow. She might meet someone on the Camino that
Yes.
totally changes her life, right? And she comes home and says,
I don't want
Mom,
to think about that part.
Dad, I've met this person, and we're off to go live in wherever.
Yes, yeah,
So
totally.
yes, but I'm 100% agree. And I talk about when people ask, like, what do I do? And I say, well, I'm an enigma because there are different facets of who I am. And there are different parts of my life. And I have changed my careers. I've changed my entire profile of what I did and how I was described in my role professionally several times in my life. And that's okay. I don't think we need to, and I think we need to break that chain and that pattern. And I'm really pleased to see that the current generation is far more comfortable with doing that. Is just saying, you know what? I thought I wanted to be X, but no, I don't. I want to go do this because I've had an experience with that, and that's where my heart soars.
Yes, yes. So we need to follow our heart a little bit more instead of our mind, who
Yes,
thinks that we need to do what we need to do, right?
exactly.
Yes, I
Exactly.
love that. And I think this is a great end of this interview about the pilgrimage and the power of the pilgrimage, about you, your experience, what it can do for you, and that it doesn't have to be really big and long, but it can be smaller as well. So, to prepare yourself, start to be present when you go out and enjoy what you see.
Yes,
And that is already the first start of a little pilgrimage.
it is most definitely. And I would like to kind of give a little challenge to
Yeah.
everybody that is watching us is that starting today, when next time you step outside your door, is pause, take a deep breath, and say, okay, on my drive to the store today, on my way to work today, on my walk around the block, either for myself or with the dog, I'm going to, back to your point, use at least three of my senses and notice, what do I smell? What do I see? What am I hearing?
Yes. And if you start to do that, you will develop your senses even more. So now you start to smell everything, and that is not always helpful.
Very agreed, especially in the springtime in the country.
Right. But I love that. And I would like to ask that anybody who goes on this video and goes on the replay or is right now here live, I would love to hear what they feel they can do, or they might have that big Camino de Santiago on their bucket list as well.
Yes.
So let us know, do you have anything like big on your list, or do you want to start smaller, or are you just starting with being more present in outside, not inside, outside right now, and use your senses?
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. So I think this is a great end with a challenge from Valerie. I hope that if you start to work on this challenge, let us know how it is going.
Yes,
Right?
most
Connect with us.
definitely.
You, where can they find you, Valerie?
You can find me on Facebook as Tranquil and the number one,
Okay.
or on Instagram as Buyer Valerie.
Okay. Awesome. And I will put this on and I will try to tag you. And otherwise, please share it to yourself, because StreamYard doesn't always let me all do that. But so, and if anybody wants to connect with Valerie and they cannot find it, just put your name underneath and Valerie will connect with you, because
Yes.
she has so much wisdom to make your pilgrimage as powerful as you want. So use that, use those resources, because we only want you to become more who you are with
Exactly.
knowing what you want and why you want it.
Exactly. And we would love to hear about your experiences. And so please do drop a note in the comments or DM myself or Ariana, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, and don't forget, the story of Valerie is found in the book Sacred Wisdom. So we will put that in the comments too, right, Valerie? You need to help remind me.
Yes.
So but that's where you can find the story of Valerie and also the preparation to do it yourself.
Awesome.
All
Thank
right,
you
thank you
so
so
much
much. Yeah,
for
thank
the
you, Valerie.
opportunity to chat today. I could go on for hours.
I know, and I love that too. But you know what? We should go for a walk.
Yes, we
So
definitely shall.
yeah, so thank you so much. We'll see you again.
Thanks again. Bye bye.